The day the world almost ended. The Cuban Missile Crisis introduction. A world on the brink. In the autumn of 1962, the world teetered on the edge of nuclear annihilation. For 13 harrowing days, the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a high-stakes standoff that brought humanity closer to Armageddon than at any other point in history. Known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, this event was not just a chapter in Cold War history, it was a stark reminder of how fragile peace can be. What began as a covert Soviet operation in Cuba escalated into a global crisis, with millions holding their breath as leaders navigated the razor-thin line between diplomacy and disaster. The roots of the crisis. To understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, we must rewind to the broader context of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, ideological rivals since the end of World War II, were locked in an arms race. Both nations amassed vast nuclear arsenals, each capable of obliterating the other multiple times over. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction kept direct conflict at bay, but proxy battles and espionage fueled constant tension. Enter Cuba. In 1959, Fidel Castro led a revolution that overthrew the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista, establishing a communist government. The US responded with economic sanctions and, in 1961, the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, a CIA-orchestrated attempt to topple Castro that failed spectacularly. This pushed Cuba deeper into the Soviet orbit. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev saw an opportunity. Placing nuclear missiles in Cuba would counterbalance US missiles in Turkey and Italy, which were aimed at the USSR, and protect his new ally from further American aggression. By mid-1962, the Soviets began secretly shipping ballistic missiles and intermediate-range ballistic missiles to Cuba. These weapons could strike targets across the US East Coast, including Washington, D.C. In under 10 minutes. The spark, discovery, and escalation. On October 14, 1962, a US U-2 reconnaissance plane captured irrefutable photographic evidence of Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. The images showed launch pads, missile trailers, and support equipment, clear proof of a nuclear threat just 90 miles from Florida's shores. President John F. Kennedy was briefed the next day. He assembled the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, a group of top advisors, including his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and Secretary of State Dean Rusk. The group debated options furiously. Airstrikes bomb the missile sites to eliminate the threat immediately. Invasion. Launch a full-scale military assault on Cuba. Blockade. Impose a naval quarantine to prevent further Soviet shipments. Diplomacy. Kennedy opted for the blockade, rebranded as a quarantine to avoid the legal implications of a blockade. On October 22, he addressed the nation in a televised speech, revealing the crisis to the world and demanding the removal of the missiles. U.S. forces were placed on high alert, reaching DEFCON 2, the highest level of readiness short of war in U.S. history. Soviet ships, loaded with more missiles, approached the quarantine line in the Atlantic. The world watched in horror as the superpowers inched toward confrontation. In the U.S., families stocked bomb shelters, schools practiced air raid drills, and panic buying emptied store shelves. Globally, headlines screamed of impending doom. The tense standoff. Close calls and hidden dangers. The crisis peaked between October 22nd and 28th, a period immortalized as the 13 days. Unknown to the public at the time, the situation was even more perilous than it appeared. Nuclear submarines. Soviet subs, armed with nuclear torpedoes, patrolled near the blockade. One U.S. destroyer nearly provoked an attack when it dropped depth charges to force a sub to surface, unaware that the sub's captain had orders to fire if threatened. Missile readiness. By October 27, some Soviet missiles in Cuba were operational and targeted at U.S. cities. A U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson Jr., heightening fears of escalation. Miscommunications. Khrushchev sent conflicting messages, one conciliatory, the other aggressive due to internal Soviet debates. Castro, believing an invasion was imminent, urged Khrushchev to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. Kennedy and Khrushchev exchanged letters, with back-channel diplomacy playing a crucial role. Robert Kennedy met secretly with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin. Resolution. A deal in the shadows. On October 28, Black Saturday, the crisis is most dangerous. Khrushchev blinked. He announced the withdrawal of Soviet missiles from Cuba, averting war. The resolution involved a secret compromise. The USSR removed its missiles and bombers from Cuba. The US publicly pledged not to invade Cuba. Privately, the US agreed to dismantle its Jupiter missiles in Turkey within 6 months. The crisis officially ended on November 20th, when the quarantine was lifted after verification of the missile removal. Aftermath and legacy. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a near miss that changed the world. Casualties were minimal, but the psychological impact was profound. It exposed the dangers of nuclear proliferation and led to key reforms. Hotline establishment, a direct communication link between the White House and the Kremlin, was installed in 1963 to prevent future arms control. The crisis spurred the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, banning atmospheric, underwater, and space nuclear tests. Shift in strategy. Both sides moved toward recognizing the perils of brinkmanship. Khrushchev was ousted in 1964, partly due to the crisis's fallout, while Kennedy's handling boosted his legacy. Today, the crisis serves as a cautionary tale. In an era of renewed nuclear tensions with conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, it reminds us of the human cost of escalation. As Robert McNamara later reflected, we lucked out. It was luck that prevented nuclear war. Conclusion. Lessons from the abyss. The Cuban Missile Crisis was just the day the world almost ended. Was 13 days of collective terror that underscored the importance of restraint, empathy, and dialogue. Leaders like Kennedy and Khrushchev, despite their flaws, chose negotiation over annihilation. In our interconnected world, where nuclear threats persist, we must heed this history to ensure such a day never comes again. Subscribe, like, and comments for more.